Incursion near the Gaza border. Nick, I understand you've been hearing some activity down there. What have you been seeing?
Yeah, Anderson, because we're hearing that the troops have the green light to go in, the defense minister saying that they could be in Gaza soon, we're really watching out for any signs of an incursion. We saw in the area over my shoulder here a little earlier, tank fire. We can see the tracer, the red light, the red illumination, if you will, on the tank fire, heavy machine gun fire, flares being fired in that area. Now, that is an area, if there were to be an incursion, it would be a likely place for an incursion. Why? Because in 2014, that is the area into Beit Hanun that the IDF went into. Just a few minutes ago, before we came on air right now, we were hearing quite sustained small arms fire over my shoulder in this direction. There were flares up in that direction a little earlier as well. This is not saying that there is a ground incursion. This is really, I think, telling us that there are troops down there. They are close to the wire with the fence with Gaza. They are really on high alert for any indications of Hamas trying to spot them, trying to target them, trying to get ready for their approach if and when it comes. So they're really on the triggers. Their fingers are on their triggers, and that's what we've been hearing this evening. Where it goes in the coming hours, we don't know. But this is where we're going to be watching, because if there were an incursion, we would expect potentially this to be one of the places, Anderson.
Nick, we'll check in with you. Kayla, what's the White House saying to expect from the president in a few minutes?
Well, Anderson, the president, as he's known to do, is making finishing touches to the speech right up until delivery. We know that this is going to be a broad message that the world is at an inflection point and it's fighting a war against tyranny. That this is a shared enemy by democratic countries, and that Ukraine and Israel are finding themselves on the front line of this fight. And while it's a speech directly to the American people, it's meant to be accessible. It's not about Congress, it's not about the budget, but the backdrop is the fact that there is a real leadership vacuum on Capitol Hill, and there are real debates about levels of federal spending that have cast into confusion the government's ability to fund itself beyond the middle of November. So the president has a real sales pitch to make to the American people, to leadership on Capitol Hill, as the White House prepares to send up a package north of $100 billion in the coming days.
Caitlin, President Biden's popularity here in Israel has soared since this attack began, both for the speech he gave and also for the speech he gave here and the visit here, first time a president visiting during wartime. What do you expect tonight?
It's kind of remarkable how tied he is to everything that's happening here, and we'll see what that looks like, of course, once Israel does go into Gaza, as we expect them to do. But I was just thinking about this today, as, you know, obviously, as Kayla was noting, this is going to be a bigger speech on multiple fronts: Ukraine, Taiwan, just democracy, period, and how the U.S. helping these countries fight these fights keeps U.S. troops out of it, keeps the U.S. out of it to a degree. But he is so closely tied to this. I mean, he came here yesterday and sat in on a cabinet meeting, not just any cabinet meeting, but a wartime cabinet meeting, that we have never seen a U.S. president do something like that with another government, sit in on their cabinet meetings, and giving these strong speeches talking about the U.S.'s support here. And I was thinking of the way that President Biden has talked about approaching Netanyahu, how we saw this in 2021 when, of course, there was that 21-day infighting. And he's always had this idea that keeping Netanyahu closer helps moderate him to a degree. And we certainly, I mean, we saw him literally hug Netanyahu when he got off the plane here. And I just think that is something.
I wasn't sure who was hugging who. It seemed like Netanyahu went in first.
Yeah, he kind of embraced him. And I was reading some Israeli journalists today who were saying, you know, that it was kind of a bear hug that's not always meant to just show your embrace, but it's also a sign of restraint, of how to tell you what to do next and how to moderate. And it's just not.
Let's listen in to the president.
We're facing an inflection point in history. One of those moments where the decisions we make today are going to determine the future for decades to come. That's what I'd like to talk with you about tonight. Now, early this morning, I returned from Israel. They tell me I'm the first American president to travel there during the war. I met with the Prime Minister and members of his cabinet. And most movingly, I met with Israelis who had personally lived through horrific horror of the attack by Hamas on the 7th of October. More than 1,300 people slaughtered in Israel, including at least 32 American citizens. Scores of innocents, from infants to the elderly grandparents, Israelis, Americans taken hostage. As I told the families of Americans being held captive by Hamas, we're pursuing every avenue to bring their loved ones home. As president, There is no higher priority for me than the safety of Americans held hostage. The terrorist group Hamas unleashed pure, unadulterated evil in the world. But sadly, the Jewish people know perhaps better than anyone that there is no limit to the depravity of the people when they want to inflict pain on others. In Israel, I saw people who are strong, determined, resilient, and also angry, in shock and in deep, deep pain. I also spoke with President Abbas, the Palestinian Authority, and reiterated the United States remains committed to the Palestinian people's right to dignity and to self-determination. The actions of Hamas terrorists don't take that right away. Like so many other, I'm heartbroken by the tragic loss of Palestinian life, including the explosion at the hospital in Gaza, which was not done by the Israelis. We mourn every innocent life lost. We can't ignore the humanity of innocent Palestinians who only want to live in peace and have an opportunity. You know, the assault on Israel echoes nearly 20 months of war, tragedy, and brutality inflicted on the people of Ukraine, people that were very badly hurt since Putin launched his all-out invasion. We've not forgotten the mass graves, the bodies found bearing signs of torture, rape used as a weapon by the Russians, and thousands of Ukrainian children forcibly taken into Russia, stolen from their parents. It's sick. Hamas and Putin represent different threats, but they share this in common. They both want to completely annihilate a neighboring democracy, completely annihilate it. Hamas' stated purpose for existing is the destruction of the state of Israel and the murder of Jewish people. Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. Hamas uses Palestinian civilians as human shields, and innocent Palestinian families are suffering greatly because of them. Meanwhile, Putin denies Ukraine has or ever had real statehood. He claims the Soviet Union created Ukraine. And just 2 weeks ago, he told the world that if the United States and our allies withdraw, and if the United States withdraw, our allies will as well, military support for Ukraine would have, quote, a week left to live, but we're not withdrawing. I know these conflicts can seem far away, and it's natural to ask, why does this matter to America? So let me share with you why making sure Israel and Ukraine succeed is vital for America's national security. You know, history has taught us that when terrorists don't pay a price for their terror, when dictators don't pay a price for their aggression, they cause more chaos and death and more destruction. They keep going, and the cost and the threats to America and the world keep rising. So if we don't stop Putin's appetite for power and control in Ukraine, he won't limit himself just to Ukraine. Putin's already threatened to remind Poland that their western land was a gift from Russia. One of his top advisors, a former president of Russia, has called Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania Russia's Baltic provinces. These are all NATO allies. For 75 years, NATO has kept peace in Europe and has been the cornerstone of American security. And if Putin attacks a NATO ally, we will defend every inch of NATO which the treaty requires and calls for. We'll have something that we do not seek. Make it clear, we do not seek to have American troops fighting in Russia or fighting against Russia. Beyond Europe, we know that our allies, and maybe most important, our adversaries and competitors, are watching. They're watching our response in Ukraine as well. And if we walk away and let Putin erase Ukraine's independence, would-be aggressors around the world would be emboldened to try the same. The risk of conflict and chaos could spread in other parts of the world, in the Indo-Pacific, in the Middle East, especially in the Middle East. Iran is supporting Russia in Ukraine, and is supporting Hamas and other terrorist groups in the region, and will continue to hold them accountable, I might add. The United States and our partners across the region are working to build a better future for the Middle East. One where the Middle East is more stable, better connected to its neighbors, and through innovative projects like the India-Middle East-Europe Rail Corridor that I announced this year at the summit of the world's biggest economies. More predictable markets, more employment, less raids, less grievances, less war when connected. It benefits the people who would benefit the people of the Middle East and will benefit us. American leadership is what holds the world together. American alliances are what keep us, America, safe. American values are what make us a partner that other nations want to work with. To put all that at risk if we walk away from Ukraine, we turn our backs on Israel, it's just not worth it. That's why tomorrow I'm going to send to Congress an urgent budget request to fund America's national security needs, to support our critical partners including Israel and Ukraine. It's a smart investment that's going to pay dividends for American security for generations. Help us keep American troops out of harm's way. Help us build a world that is safer, more peaceful, more prosperous for our children and grandchildren. In Israel, we must make sure that they have what they need to protect their people today and always. The security package I'm sending to Congress and asking Congress to do is an unprecedented commitment to Israel's security that will sharpen Israel's qualitative military edge, which we've committed to, the qualitative military edge. We're going to make sure Iron Dome continues to guard the skies over Israel. We're going to make sure other hostile actors in the region know that Israel is stronger than ever and prevent this conflict from spreading. Look, at the same time, President Netanyahu and I discussed again yesterday the critical need for Israel to operate by the laws of war. That means protecting civilians in combat as best as they can. The people of Gaza urgently need food, water, and medicine. Yesterday, in discussions with the leaders of Israel and Egypt, I secured an agreement for the first shipment of humanitarian assistance from the United Nations to Palestinian civilians in Gaza. If Hamas does not divert or steal these shipments, we're going to provide an opening for sustained delivery of life-saving humanitarian assistance for the Palestinians. As I said in Israel, as hard as it is, we cannot give up on peace. We cannot give up on a two-state solution. Israel and Palestinians equally deserve to live in safety, dignity, and peace. You know, and here at home, we have to be honest with ourselves. In recent years, too much hate has given too much oxygen, fueling racism, the rise of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, right here in America. It's also intensified in the wake of recent events that led to the horrific threats and attacks that both shock us and break our hearts. On October 7th, terror attacks have triggered deep scars and terrible memories in the Jewish community. Today, Jewish families worried about being targeted in school, wearing symbols of the face walking down the street, or going out about their daily lives. You know, I know many of you in the Muslim American community, the Arab American community, the Palestinian American community, and so many others are outraged and hearty, saying to yourselves, here we go again with Islamophobia and distrust we saw after 9/11. Just last week, a mother was brutally stabbed. A little boy, here in the United States, a little boy who just turned 6 years old was murdered in their home outside of Chicago. His name was Wadiha, a proud American, a proud Palestinian American family. We can't stand by and stand silent when this happens. We must, without equivocation, denounce anti-Semitism. We must also, without equivocation, denounce Islamophobia. And to all you hurting, those of you hurting, I want you to know I see you. You belong. And I want to say this to you. You're all America. You're all America. This is in a moment, you know, in moments like these, when fear and suspicion, anger and rage run hard, that we have to work harder than ever to hold on to the values that make us who we are. We're a nation of religious freedom, freedom of expression. We all have a right to debate and disagree without fear of being targeted in schools or workplaces or in our communities. We must renounce violence and vitriol. See each other not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. When I was in Israel yesterday, I said that when America experienced the hell of 9/11, we felt enraged as well. While we sought and got justice, we made mistakes. So I cautioned the government of Israel not to be blinded by rage. And here in America, let us not forget who we are. We reject all forms of hate, whether against Muslims, Jews, or anyone. That's what great nations do. And we are a great nation. On Ukraine, I'm asking Congress to to make sure we can continue to send Ukraine the weapons they need to defend themselves and their country without interruption, so Ukraine can stop Putin's brutality in Ukraine. They are succeeding. When Putin invaded Ukraine, he thought he would take Kyiv and all of Ukraine in a matter of days. Well, over a year later, Putin has failed, and he continues to fail. Kyiv still stands because of the bravery of the Ukrainian people. Ukraine has regained more than 50% of the territory Russian troops once occupied, backed by U.S.-led coalition of more than 50 countries around the world, all doing its part to support Kyiv. What would happen if we walked away? We are the essential nation. Meanwhile, Putin has turned to Iran and North Korea to buy attack drones and ammunition to terrorize Ukrainian cities and people. From the outset, I've said, I will not send American troops to fight in Ukraine. All Ukraine is asking for is help, for the weapons, munitions, the capacity, the capability to push invading Russian forces off their land, and the air defense systems to shoot down Russian missiles before they destroy Ukrainian cities. Let me be clear about something. We send Ukrainian equipment sitting in our stockpiles, and when we use the money allocated by Congress, we use it to replenish our own stores, our own stockpiles, with new equipment. Equipment that defends America and is made in America. Patriot missiles for air defense batteries, made in Arizona. Artillery shells manufactured in 12 states across the country, in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas, and so much more. You know, just as in World War II, today patriotic American workers are building the arsenal of democracy and serving the cause of freedom. Let me close with this. Earlier this year, I boarded Air Force One for a secret flight to Poland. There I boarded a train with blacked out windows for a 10-hour ride each way to Kyiv, to stand with the people of Ukraine ahead of the one-year anniversary of their brave fight against Putin. And I'm told I was the first American to enter a war zone not controlled by the United States military since President Lincoln. With me was just a small group of security personnel and a few advisors. But when I exited that train and met President Zelensky, I didn't feel alone. I was bringing with me the idea of America, the promise of America, to the people who are today fighting for the same things we fought for 250 years ago. Freedom, independence, self-determination. And as I walked through Kyiv with President Zelensky, with air raid sirens sounding in the distance, I felt something I've always believed, more strongly than ever before. America is a beacon to the world. Still. Whereas my friend Madeleine Albright said, the indispensable nation. Tonight there are innocent people all over the world who hope because of us, who believe in a better life because of us, who are desperate not to be forgotten by us, and are waiting for us. But time is of the essence. I know we have our divisions at home. We have to get past them. We can't let petty, partisan, angry politics get in the way of our responsibilities as a great nation. We cannot and will not let terrorists like Hamas and tyrants like Putin win. I refuse to let that happen. In moments like these, we have to remember who we are. We are the United States of America. The United States of America. And there is nothing beyond our capacity if we do it together. My fellow Americans, thank you for your time. May God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
This is President Biden speaking roughly 15 minutes, laying out plans that he will be sending to Congress to support both Israel and Ukraine, and making a case for what is at stake for Americans.
Right, Mr. President, great speech, well, I say yes. Right on, Mr. President, great speech, if ever there was one. We salute you. Thank you so much.
To destroy a democratic neighbor.
Yeah, a neighboring democracy. That was the line that stuck out to me the most, beyond the one of what he said, the lessons that he believed should be imparted for Israel, similar to what he believes the U.S. did after 9/11. Of course, he is someone who voted for the Iraq War as a senator. He has later said that he regretted that vote, and he seems to be trying to clearly send that message. He was doing so when he was here, and tonight saying that Hamas and Vladimir Putin are very different. Obviously, Hamas is this terrorist group that the U.S. says operates out of Gaza. Putin is a world leader, but he was saying that they both have the same goal, and he was using that link to say this is why we should continue funding not only Israel and the Iron Dome that we've seen intercepting rockets that have been fired over Tel Aviv, but also in Ukraine, talking about continuing to push for that fight and pushing back against those who have said maybe we shouldn't be funding Ukraine. He said it's okay to ask those questions. He gets why people do, but this is why he's explaining why it's important in his
Also
view.
trying to sell it as a good investment. That was literally a term he used, both because as a member of NATO, he talked about Vladimir Putin's, comments made about Poland, also Russian officials' comments about Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania.
And he referenced something that Putin said a few weeks ago that didn't get a lot of attention, which was that if the U.S. and other Western allies stop helping Ukraine, stop supporting Ukraine, that he believes they'd run out of funding within a week, and it would completely eradicate their forces, their fighting forces, and their support that they have.
Kayla Tausche, the president also spoke very clearly about anti-Semitism in the United States and Islamophobia.
And he warned the American public to essentially side with their better angels, to avoid some of those divisions and to avoid some of that hatred. But what I saw most in its simplest form in this speech was the president trying to make an argument of democracy versus dictatorships. It's a very lofty argument, but he's trying to distill it down to a kitchen table conversation, and it was that investment line, Anderson, that you just pointed out that stuck out most to me, where he said this is a smart investment that will pay dividends for decades to come, and he lays out a very clear cost if this investment isn't made, and that is the involvement of U.S. troops. He says, I do not seek to have U.S. troops fighting. He said specifically against Russia, but he also alluded to U.S. troops potentially fighting in the Middle East and suggested that if these wars widen beyond Ukraine's borders, beyond Israel's borders, that there is the potential or the likelihood for U.S. troops to become involved. And that's a very clear-cut argument to try to make to the American people. He talked about the fact that if Putin is allowed to continue, that this war could go into NATO territory, at which point the U.S. would have no choice to become involved. And that's just a very, very stark argument to make to the American people about why this is needed, not only for this generation, but for generations to come. And to that point, Anderson, that you made about some of the divisions here at home, the noise that you're hearing right now behind my live shot are some pro-Palestinian protests that are happening just right outside the White House gate. People with megaphones, with messages for the media. We're trying to listen to that as well as the president's speech at the same time. But clearly, these are conflicts that have struck a chord here at home, not just overseas.
Yeah, Ben Wiedemann, who's joining us from Lebanon tonight. Ben, the president also spoke about Palestinians, both in the United States, Palestinian Americans, and also his concerns about Palestinian civilians, and his desire and his insistence on opening up corridors and getting humanitarian supplies across that Rafah border, which he hopes, he says, if Hamas does not attempt to steal the beginning aid that will flow in perhaps as soon as this weekend, not Friday as had been earlier expected, that would be a continuing flow of humanitarian assistance, Ben.
Yes, well, we'll see if that happens, because there were high expectations it was going to happen tomorrow, Friday. Apparently it's not, perhaps on Saturday. And until that starts to happen, there's going to be a feeling among many, particularly in Gaza, that these are hollow promises, because at the same time that the United States is promising to get that aid into Gaza, at the same time the United States is militarily and rhetorically strongly backing Israel in its offensive against Hamas in Gaza. And that's going to continue. Therefore, words from the American president are going to continue to ring hollow, not just in Gaza itself, but across the broader Middle East, where we've seen protests in almost every country, and we're expecting more to come. So The words sound good, but until there's actual aid arriving on the ground in Gaza, actually relieving some of the suffering of the people there, it's going to be hollow words. Anderson?
General Hertling, you spent your life in uniform. I'm wondering what you think of what you heard tonight.
I'm taking all this in, Anderson, and seeing several of you in a combat zone right now, while some of us are in either D.C. or Washington. And I picked up on the initial words of the president when he said we were at an inflection point. And from someone who spent 4 decades in uniform, I firmly believe this is one of the most dangerous times in our history. The things he pointed out, first of all, in just summary, others are seeking our help. He tied both Israel's actions and Ukraine's actions to a fight for survival, a fight for protection of their people, a fight for freedom and dignity. And then what he also said was that others are watching, both our friends, our foes, our competitors. And, you know, what he then did, which I found very moving, was he tied all of that not to the money, not to what's expected, and not to the capacity of Americans to help, but he tied it all to what should be our values. Our human dignity, our respect for one another, our religious freedoms, and our freedoms writ large. Whereas this is an appeal, certainly, and it's a warning that he's going to send packages, as he called it, to Congress to fund. What it really is, I think, tying back to that inflection point, is saying this is a time for action, as Ben just said. People in Ukraine, people in Israel are depending on us as that beacon of hope that he described. And it's important that we turn the light on and we support them as best as possible, because they reflect who we are as a people.
Jim Sciutto, your thoughts?
Well, it's notable today that the president making clear the U.S. does not want to get involved in direct conflict with Russia over Ukraine, or in direct conflict, say, with Iran over the war in Israel. But what we saw today was just how dangerous the possibility is, at least, of escalation. You had a case off the coast of Yemen, we reported earlier, where missiles were fired from Houthi rebels. They are Iran-backed. The question at the time, were they fired at the U.S. destroyer or elsewhere? The U.S. destroyer took them out, took several of them out. We learned later that, in fact, those missiles appeared to be headed towards Israel, a chance of opening up another front against Israel, not just from the north, say with Hezbollah, also backed by Iran, but here Houthi rebels to Israel's east. At the same time today, we saw U.S. forces fired on in Syria and in Iraq, again by what are in effect proxy forces for Iran. And you have 2 U.S. carrier groups now in the eastern Mediterranean. So while U.S. forces don't want to be directly involved, they are in this region now, supporting Israel, but they're also in the line of fire, and they can be vulnerable. Hezbollah has thousands of missiles it can target at those ships. The Houthis have many missiles, as we saw today, and you have those Iranian proxy forces in Syria and Iraq that could put U.S. forces based there into danger. That is the issue here, that you could have a multi-front war around Israel. You could also, whether they want to or not, find U.S. troops and sailors in danger if that war expands.
And Nick Robertson, as the president was talking, you are down in Sderot, I believe, tonight. And what have you been hearing?
Yeah, we've been hearing artillery fire going in, and a steady, an intermittent but steady salvo of artillery shells that were sort of bursting above the ground and coming down in sort of red fragments before you could hear the explosion as they detonated on the ground. We saw a multiple number of those and steady explosions in the background right now. So, you know, the president speaking, Israel is acting. This is a moment here where the conflict with Hamas can enter a new phase. I'm not sure that it's going to go into Gaza, that whether the IDF will take it into Gaza tonight, but you just feel it here. The troops are close to the wire. The tanks are firing through the fields where the troops are expected to go into in the coming days. We've heard the guns firing, the troops' guns, heavy machine guns, small arms fire, explosions still going off behind me, drones in the sky, fighter jets in the sky. While the president's speaking, the tempo of war here feels like it's really moving ahead, Anderson.
Yeah, Caitlin Collins, the money is going to Congress. The request is going to Congress. What happens there? What is the dysfunction in the House? How does that impact this?
What we've heard from some sources that we've been talking to, some senators, is that maybe they would pass this package first and then send it over to the House to up the pressure on them. Because the Senate is in pretty much agreement. There are a few voices who disagree, but they're in pretty much agreement on sending Ukraine aid and Israel. I mean, you've seen Mitch McConnell has been one of the few people who has come out repeatedly and made the argument for funding Ukraine. But this request is going to Congress tomorrow. It's not going to get passed anytime soon unless they can figure out what they're doing with the House Speaker. And we saw they're going to have another vote tomorrow, we are told. We believe around 10 a.m. is what our Hill team says. But what President Biden is asking for cannot be granted right now because there is no House Speaker and therefore there is no action happening in the House.
I mean, it is incredible. It's an extraordinary situation given you just heard General Hurtley saying this is maybe one of the most dangerous times in our history.
At an inflection point, and just the idea that President Biden was just down there in a hotel basement that doubles as a bomb shelter, meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu in the War Cabinet yesterday. And I was told that this got brought up, what's happening on Capitol Hill. The Israeli senior government officials were talking to the president about that and how it's going to affect the $10 billion that he's asking for Israel. And he assured them that he thinks in the end, I mean, it's almost certain he's going to get what he's asking for, especially on Israel. But the idea that this is an impediment and that this is a roadblock is just remarkable in and of itself.
There are a lot of folks in Congress who would like to separate the Ukraine and Israel aid.
Well, and there's some Democrats on the progressive left who don't want to give Israel unconditional aid as they've framed it. I mean, you've seen how they've been talking about this. I'm thinking of people like Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, all of these other progressive left lawmakers who have also questioned the U.S. unwavering support for Israel and the way that it goes, and especially with what you've seen with the civilians in Gaza. And President Biden acknowledged that multiple times tonight, saying, A, that the Palestinian civilians are not Hamas, they are not one and the same, but also saying that he told Netanyahu that he needs to abide by the laws of war and therefore not target civilians and make sure that that's part of that. That's been a point of disagreement from what you've heard from Israeli officials and how they're conducting that in this sense of palpable rage. And he was saying, don't be blinded by your rage. He essentially argued that America was after 9/11.
Nick Robertson in Stroit, there was a government official here in Israel today, I believe a finance minister, but correct me if I'm wrong, who said something to the effect that the IDF now has the green light and it's up to them of when this operation will begin. Is that accurate? Is that exactly what he said? And also, is that the truth? Is it actually now the IDF's decision? Has the ball been handed to them?
Yeah, I was asking him, the economy minister, and he said quite specifically, and I pressed him on this issue, is it still a political decision that has to be taken if you're going to go into Gaza? And he was, no, the political decision's been taken, the green light by the politicians has been passed, has been given to the military, and it's up to them on their own terms when they feel that they're ready to go in, when they've got the military assets in the place that they need them, when they feel that everything is correct, then they can go in. We just don't know when that time precisely is going to be, and they are beginning to get a vision of what they're going to do when they go in, which is we know deconstruct Hamas, but one of the things is put a massive, much bigger, much wider, much stronger sort of zone around Gaza. The whole 50 miles of that Gaza fence, that's going to have a huge exclusion zone built into it, which will essentially be a free fire zone, a kill zone, if you will, when no one will be able to go into it. So what happened 2 weekends ago absolutely cannot happen again. So the plans are advancing. We don't get many details, but absolutely now it is down to the military to make the next move when they want to call it, Anderson.
And General Hurtling, I mean, given, again, your 4 decades of military experience, what do you expect this operation to look like?
Well, we can talk about Israel and what the operation might look like compared to what's happened in the past. But Anderson, I don't mean to get too sappy, but I'd like to get back to trying to tie this all together. I honestly believe we're in the first chapter of a new book of American history. There are two fights going on by two of our friends, Ukraine and Israel. They need our help. In this kind of situation, good people help their friends because they see the world like we do. They want sovereignty, they want peace for their nation, they want to secure people, and they're depending on us to help them out. So the actions in Israel, the continued actions in Ukraine, we'll judge that on the battlefield. But it just goes back to what the president is saying tonight, is that we need to help them both regain their sovereignty and their territory and their freedom.
General Hurtley, Nick Robertson, Jim Shuda, Ben Wiedemann, Kayla Tauchi, thank you. Caitlin is going to be back at the top of the hour from Tel Aviv. Next, new intelligence and a new CNN analysis of everything we know about Tuesday's explosion at Al-Ali Baptist Hospital in Gaza City. Later, what we saw today at kibbutz near Oz, one of the settlements very close to the Gaza border, about a mile and a half from the Gaza border. You can see it through the fence, which saw so many men, women, and children murdered or taken hostage from near Oz. This was the first time reporters were allowed in based on the security situation. I went there, I spent much of the day there. I'll show you some of what I found.
It's electric. It's gas.
Quite the paradox.
It really is both. The first ever Lexus RX plug-in hybrid.
Attention Medicare beneficiaries. This is an important message for everyone on Medicare. Attention everyone on Medicare. Today we are talking about 2024 Medicare Advantage plans. If you don't have a 2024 Medicare Advantage Part C plan, call now because there may be a Medicare Part C plan with additional benefits available in your zip code. Right now is the Medicare annual enrollment period. You can call now to see if there are any changes to your
Help Ukraine and help Israel succeed. And stay sovereign nations evolving peacefully. But first I have to get through this. A song by Paul Beckman, Polly Rainbow Song, also the new and first leader of humankind in the free world. Created October 19th, 2023. Help Ukraine and Israel. Don't desert them now. Help Ukraine and Israel. Don't desert them. It's the best investment you can make for now and future generations. and work towards peace in their lands, staying sovereign nations and becoming democratic with freedom for all, looking towards becoming friends with the world and everyone in their domain, in their borders, treating everyone under the sun with friendship. Well, now we've got to help them through these times when things are looking strained. It's the best investment they can have, the best investment for America and the world, to keep democratic nations alive, despite foes like Putin and Hamas, full of atrocities in their history, who want to bring nothing but demise to those nations. Well, we've got to stand up to Putin, who's the modern world's Adolf Hitler. Well, we've got to stand up to Hamas, who has become a terrorist organization, the worst, yes. Atrocity after atrocity. Just look at the song videos I have here in this playlist of the war with Israel and Hamas, the war between them that has started October 7th. Keep funding Ukraine. Keep funding Israel. Help their Iron Dome. Help Ukraine, President Zelensky. Give them everything they need weapon-wise. Give them everything they need weapon-wise, yeah, to succeed. As President Biden said, we're not sending in troops. Instead, we're just helping them to defend themselves. Can't you do that? If you stop that, you make America less secure, and you let the terrorists win. After they have a win, they will begin more and more to take over this world until the world is saying, oh no, the world as we know it is about to disappear. There will no longer be freedom in it and democracy for everyone you hear. Everyone will be under Putin's Iron Curtain, the new resurrection of Russia, of the USSR, and we'll be a block in it. Well, and Hamas, if it wins, will look upon anyone who tried to help Israel with the same vantage point, their demise. Our next target will be America, says Hamas, after you've taken care of Israel and made it no more. Don't let this happen. Don't let this happen. And what about Iran, who's supposedly the kingpin of all these terrorist groups, lending them, supplying them everything they need to do harm to others, to wipe out Israel and all its people. The next thing they'll do, oh, America, help them. Let's aim at them. And wipe out every American. Don't you see now? President Biden's speech was so fantastic. He said it all. I don't even need to make this song, but I am, and perhaps I've helped accentuate how important his speech was, plus all the CNN wonderful reporters. In the aftermath of President Biden's speech with Anderson Cooper, speaking so well, and they're experts on topics so dear to the heart and to the psyche and the intelligence of every American, not just American, but every Earth citizen. You want to live on an Earth that allows freedom and democracy, or do you want this entire Earth to be controlled by Russia or religious zealots who do not tolerate others? Again, that was a song by Paul Beckman, Polly Rainbow Song, also the new and first leader of humankind in the free world, created October 19th, 2023. For an explanation of my New Age name, Paul Beckman, for an explanation of my mainstream name, Paul Beckman, my New Age name, Polly Rainbow Song, and the utterance, also the new and first leader of humankind in the free world, please go to Internet Solutions and Songs 24-7 at Polly Rainbow Song bio on YouTube, and look for the playlist Movie Song Reviews by Polly. Once there, look for any videos or song videos under a special note, and all will be explained plus more. Thank you very much. God bless. Namaste. I honor the divine in all. And just on a side note, don't worry about a thing from the vantage point of the higher philosophy, the hidden teaching, or philosophy of truth. All is well. Universal and void mind, the creative twin aspect of God, as it were, is everything. And everything is that. On that lofty level, everything is permanent, forever, eternal. We are directly connected to that. In fact, we have an eternal birthright that connects us to that. And if receptive enough, we'll find that we are that. Therefore, there's a oneness in the universe underneath everything, and we are connected to that. We are that, in which everything is always going to be fine, constant, permanent, changeless, beginningless, endless. And that is our true nature.